Want to take advantage of all the capabilities of Siri, old and new? This is MacVoices. This edition of MacVoices is supported by SaneBox. Organize your inbox and never waste time on email again. Sign up today at sanebox.com/MacVoices to save $25 on any subscription. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, it seems like it's been a little while since we talked to a Take Control author. It's definitely been a long time since we talked to Scholle McFarland. And so this is going to be the first of two interviews we do with her about two different Take Control books. Scholle, welcome. It's great to see you again. We've missed you.
Glad to be back.
No, never mind. I was going to ask you where you've been hiding, but it's like in a global pandemic, none of us have had anything to do, right?
You always know where to find me these days. Home.
Can be said for a lot of us, I think, Scholle. So the first discussion we're going to have is a book that's been out now for a little while, but it was new, and our schedules just didn't line up because of all the craziness. And that is Take Control of Siri. I love talking about Siri because I feel like that on a pretty consistent basis, we see Siri get better, but sometimes it's not by big leaps and bounds. And so you don't appreciate how improved it is. And especially if you get frustrated and decide, I'm just not going to bother, then you miss out on that. Is that a fair perception on my part?
I think so. Siri certainly changes very frequently. And it happens incrementally. You never know when it's changing. They update it so frequently. So it's great to check in and just kind of take stock of everything that's happened, which is what I was able to do with this second edition of the book.
So if I haven't checked in with Siri for a while, maybe we'll take that use case first. Mm-hmm. What kind of things should I be reconsidering at this point to start using Siri for, or when should I be asking her or him or whatever what it can do for me?
Well, one of the first changes to Siri is that it is able to answer more questions without kicking you out to a web search. In the past, we've been able to ask Siri questions and it gets answers from Wikipedia and from Wolfram Alpha, which is like a knowledge database. And it's been able to get a lot of great information from that, but you still ended up sometimes with a browser opening, it just kind of kicking you out to a general search, which is, you didn't have to type in that search, but it's not quite what you expect from a voice assistant. So now Siri is able to gather knowledge from more sources, and that includes things like the Encyclopedia Britannica, Britannica.com, HowStuffWorks.com, Reader's Digest, a whole bunch of different things like that, which means that you're going to be able to get more answers. And it's a lot of things like, how does this work? How does that work? Or what's the difference between? Those are some of the big areas of questions that it can answer now. And that can be really helpful. So what's the difference between a turtle and a tortoise? How does a hybrid car work? Now it can answer things like that with pretty detailed answers. So that's just handy because the more Siri can answer, the more useful it is when we ask a question, the more likely we are to ask another question. So those are the kind of behind the scenes improvements that it's been making that make it just that much more useful when people and make it that much more likely that people are going to ask it a question. It also has upgraded some of its health questions. Like, this is something I think during a pandemic became more noticeable that Siri doesn't really do that great of a job when you ask it health questions. Some of the other voice assistants out there who will remain nameless, if you ask them questions, they may give you answers from the Mayo Clinic or actually reliable sources. Siri generally depends on Wikipedia, which is not really, as we know, even more so now, the greatest place to be getting your knowledge. You'd like to have a vetted source. The only exception is because so many people were asking COVID-19 questions, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, that Siri does have a walkthrough now. If you say, I think I have COVID-19, or you ask something about COVID-19, it actually will walk you through a symptom-based guidance, and it's based on CDC information. So that is one place where I think the number of questions got so big that they did go in and put vetted information behind it. But we're still waiting for more.
Well, and I guess we're always going to be waiting for more because,
Yes.
we all have separate interests or areas of information that would be really nice to have at the at speaking to the air. But you just told me of some sources I had no idea that now Siri can tap, and that makes perfect sense as to why it can answer more questions. I'm just a little disappointed that I guess we don't hear more about these improvements. Can you think of any reason that Apple doesn't publicize this long and loud? Is it because they feel like maybe they are already behind a little bit and are playing catch up and don't want to be perceived as playing catch up?
I would think that that's part of it. They want to emphasize the things that are really special about Siri instead of noting the things that maybe where it is behind the other voice assistant. And I think in knowledge, it has been behind. So I think they just want that to catch up. They don't want to draw attention to the fact that it's having to catch up in those areas.
Now, we have a mutual friend, I believe, who shall remain nameless, whose big thing is he just wants to talk to the air. He doesn't want to talk to his watch. He doesn't want to talk to his HomePod or something. He just wants to talk to the air and have the answers magically appear. And he doesn't want to be trained in how to ask the questions. He just wants to ask them the way he wants to ask them, like we all do. But from what you just said, the way you phrased the question about what's the difference between a tortoise and a turtle, do we need to pay a little more attention to how we ask the questions? And does the book cover recommendations on how we phrase questions?
The book does offer recommendations for how you phrase things, but it's not as necessary as it was in the past. I feel like this is one thing that Siri is a lot better at. Even in the first edition of the book, I would have to try lots of different phrasings to figure out what worked. And I would get different answers depending on how I phrased it. I think that has really improved. And Siri really understands a lot more varieties of question as long as you're going for the same thing. So in the cases where it was a matter of phrasing, I have notes in the book, but I will say that that's a lot less of an issue than it used to be. And that's part of Siri really getting a lot better and being a lot more powerful.
Now, at some point during any discussion with Siri, we have to mention the fact that compared to some of its competitors, it has privacy as a much bigger component. And up till this point, the perception has been that that's one of the reasons that it's been a little bit behind in development, in knowledge, and being able to answer questions. Do you think that is still the case? And do you think that paying the privacy price, if you will, of maybe it not being the top dog in the voice assistants is worth it?
I think it's worth it. I mean, do you really want the speakers you have all over your house listening to you and recording everything? Most people would say no. I will say though, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that in 2019 there was a whistleblower situation with Siri, and that's that a whistleblower reported that Apple contractors regularly overheard private conversations that were recorded from Siri. And so this was not a good thing because Apple's big push has always been that they're the secure platform, that they're the place where you don't have to worry about privacy issues. And to be honest, they continue. Even with the whistleblower, it was still not as bad as the types of things that we've heard with the other voice assistants. But it did cause some changes that I think might make it that much harder for Siri to learn and grow because of the protections that are put in place. So because of the whistleblower report, Apple stopped using contractors to review video, which that doesn't hurt end users at all. That's a good thing. But it no longer stores Siri audio by default. Now you opt in to help improve Siri, which is a much more powerful protection because most people never change their defaults. Most people never look at those settings. So by default now, your audio never goes out. Instead, it makes computer-generated transcripts and they review that, which I think is a pretty good solution, but it's not as powerful as having those audio recordings. And now you can also delete your Siri data if there was data out there. It's also deleted if you disable Siri. So even though Apple has been the platform with the best privacy, even it has had some missteps recently with privacy, which kind of just goes to show you how much data we risk when we do invite the voice assistants into our house, especially if we have them listening to us. My recommendation in the book, if you're worried about privacy concerns, which a lot of people, maybe people who haven't thought about it before, should be. For instance, if you have an Apple Watch and say you're a doctor or a lawyer and you have it set so that you raise to speak. So that's one of the settings with the watch, is you just raise it and then Siri is listening. It's very easy to have an accidental activation, which you could have if you're wearing your watch, when you're talking with a client, when you're in a patient room, places where privacy is legally required. So in those cases, or really just anyone who has concerns, I recommend not the two devices that had the most accidental activations were the watch and the HomePod. So those are the two that I recommend activating manually instead of with Hey Siri if you're worried about it, or thinking about which ones you activate with Hey Siri. For instance, it's really easy to activate Siri with the watch. You just push your digital crown, and it's actually more reliable than Hey Siri on the watch. So that one I think is a given for everyone. The HomePod, maybe you only have the one in your kitchen. And now my watch is talking to me because I pushed it. Maybe you only have the HomePod in your kitchen be the one that has Hey Siri activated, because there you're going to have messy hands. That's the one you want. Otherwise, you tap the top of your HomePod to have it listen to you. But that's part of the deal. When we have voice assistants and we're trying to bring this new level of convenience into our lives, there has to be a moment of kind of thinking about what the balance is between convenience and security and privacy. And that's something that we all have to balance, whether we like it or not, or whether or not we think it's relevant for us. It's worth pausing to think about.
Well, there's so many points there. I love the fact that you couch it as a balance, because I think that's something that a lot of people don't appreciate. They just, I will save us both some emails, because somebody's going to email and say, well, then why would I use this if I have to touch something all the time? What's the point? And it's like, well, you don't have to touch something all the time, but there is a little bit of a balance, a little bit of a trade-off for that convenience. So, okay, maybe you don't let the HomePod in the bedroom, listen to everything, but maybe you're, like you say, you're fine with the kitchen. The point about the watch is a really great one for doctors, lawyers, anybody that deals in confidential information. So that there are some things that we have to think about, but these are all trade-offs. It's not just she can listen to me when I want her to and not listen to me when I don't want her to. We haven't hit that part in artificial intelligence. And if you think about it, how would you do that with a human? If the human was sitting in the room, you can't just say, don't hear this, but when I want you to get my slippers, yes, you hear it. So yeah.
I think the thing to realize is one touch is still a huge savings of time. If you need to find your Amazon password and you've got your phone, how many taps and swipes is it going to take you to dig down in there and find it? Whereas you could just push the side button on your phone and say, show me my Amazon password. It's a big savings, even though it involves a touch. So I guess I wouldn't underestimate people who think only using Hey Siri is the way to go. But actually the manual triggers, they're more secure. They're also sometimes more accurate. Like, you don't have to worry about your devices randomly going off and stuff like that. Or when you want to have one device listen to you and not another, the manual trigger will always give you what you want. So I think it's a good solution in a lot of situations, other than things that you can probably anticipate. The kitchen, when you got messy hands, obviously the car. Although cars with CarPlay often have a button too. So, but those situations usually when Hey Siri is going to be the way to go, and just make it so those are the times you use it, the times when it's really worth it and really is convenient.
And I know you've talked about this earlier, but I want to make sure folks heard it and understand that if they don't remember what they defaulted to or when they first started using it, they can go in and change those settings to share or not share with Apple.
Mm-hmm. And if they upgraded to Big Sur, by default, they're not sharing. So it's at so on the iPhone, you go to Settings, Siri and Search, Siri and Dictation History, and you'll see there the option to delete the dictation history, or you just buy my book and I'll walk you all through it in there, all the directions for all the devices. But yeah, by default in Big Sur, it's off the collecting of those voice recordings.
Even if I've already turned it on?
If you went and you manually turned it on, it's on, but you would have had to manually go turn it on.
Okay.
Yeah.
And thank you for, I love the fact that you promote the book, but it's absolutely true, because if you think about it, you've got an iPhone, you've got an iPad, you've got a watch. To some degree, you have Siri on your Mac, HomePods, you just go on and on and on. There are a lot of different devices, and it'd be really great to say, yeah, there's just one button that can turn, set them all, but they're not. They're in different places. So yeah, definitely.
Siri connects the whole Apple universe. And that's one thing that's cool about the book is I do cover all the different devices. So you can see in there, where is it most convenient? How is it going to work for me to set things up?
Today's Mac Voices is supported by SaneBox, AI for your email. By now, you know all about SaneBox's approach to your email, how it can work with any device, any platform, email, or webmail. So you don't have to make any changes to what you use or what you're doing now to benefit from SaneBox. You know about the Sane Later folder that funnels off all but the most important email to a place where you can get to it at your leisure, and the Sane Black Hole, where you put email that you never want to hear from again, and you won't, and Sane News, the folder that aggregates your newsletters and mailing lists. You know that SaneBox learns about your habits, what's important to you and what's not, and sends incoming emails to the appropriate SaneBox folders or to your inbox. Or you can teach it about the important contacts or emails yourself. The deeper you dig into SaneBox, the more options and features you discover, so you can use it at whatever level you like. No matter how you use it, SaneBox will save you time and effort in dealing with your email. All this and a whole lot more is what you get when you visit sanebox.com/MacVoices to sign up for the email service that I consider essential. Even better, when you use sanebox.com/MacVoices, you get $25 off any subscription package. sanebox.com/MacVoices. You could be in control of your email in just a few minutes. sanebox.com/MacVoices. Thanks to SaneBox for their support of MacVoices. So you did my segue for me. Big Sur, how much has changed with Siri? Is any other than the default, obviously, which we've talked about? Is there anything that Big Sur really brings to Siri that we didn't have in Catalina?
Well, it's hard to say exactly since Siri kind of hangs outside of the operating systems, it's with them and not with them. The only thing that I think is that people will really notice with the changes to the new iOS and the new macOS are really in iOS, and that's the interface of Siri. In the past, when you activated Siri, it took over your whole phone. The whole phone went black, and then you could see your question. Now Siri is much more low profile, so it's just a little, I guess, widget, even you'd call it. It's very subtle, like at one end of your phone. You can still see things that are behind it. That's probably the most obvious change. Some of the cool new things are device-based. So with the HomePod now, you can turn your HomePod into an intercom, which is kind of nifty. So say you need everybody to come up for dinner. You can say, hey, Siri, intercom, dinner time, and it will broadcast across all the HomePods in the house. That's kind of nifty.
And your whole family was just invited to dinner as you did that.
I know. Some devices are beeping at me, so I'm hopefully I didn't just do that. HomePod can now recognize different voices. That's really convenient. Previously, one of the big kind of security issues with the HomePod was that if you turned on personal services, it's basically the thing that lets you listen to your voicemails, make a call, all that sort of thing. If you turned that on, it was just on. So that meant that if you had Hey Siri on, which most people do with their HomePods, or at least did in the past, that means anybody could listen to your voicemails or look at your notes, things like that, with a very minimal amount of security in their way. So now the HomePod can actually recognize different voices. You do voice training on your iPhones, and that means that that you can turn on those features with a little more confidence. But also, it's just nice for each member of your household, because now the HomePod knows who they are and will give them the things that are tailored for them. So you have a teenager in your house. When they say, "Play me music I like," it will play music they like, not music that you like. It's not all mixed together like it used to be. So that's kind of a nifty new Siri features for the HomePod. Then there are a lot of, actually, I'll tell you one thing, probably it's a small thing, but one of the most wished for features is that now when you ask for directions with Siri, you can use Google Maps instead of Apple Maps. That's a really nice little feature that I think a lot of people have wished for. So you can say, get directions to Starbucks using Google Maps. And before, you could only get your directions from Apple Maps. And depending on where you live, maybe that was the best map program for you. Maybe it wasn't. So that's kind of a fun, useful new thing. Yeah, so there's just all sorts of, Siri just has so many little things and big things. It's almost hard to sum up what the things are. There are some weird new features I can tell you about. Would you like to hear about them?
Hey, this show is all about weird, so go for it.
So one of the stranger features that Siri now has is it will give you real world sounds. So for instance, you can say, what sound does a train make? What sound does a tuba make? What sound does a baboon make? And you can get kind of specific with your animals. I'm not sure. And then it will actually give you the sound, like a recording of the real sound. And I don't know if this was a passion project by some Siri developer, or if it was just all an elaborate setup for a "what does the fox say" joke, because there are "what does the fox say" jokes. If you say "what does the fox say," you will not get a real world sound. You will get a joke. So that's one of the odder additions to Siri we have.
Yeah, but I can also, I'm okay. I'll be an Apple apologist or something, but this would be great, for little kids.
Great for little kids. Yeah.
And so it's another way to get little kids into the Apple ecosystem, which we all think is a great thing. So, and I mean, honestly, I'll tell you the truth, Shelly, I can see a lot more use cases for that than I can for some of these skills that another voice assistant, claims to give you. I'm fascinated by some of those, because they are such niche cases, and it's like, it's like, what, do 3 people in the universe use these skills? But I could see parents having a great time, with kids, saying, this is what this is what the cow does, and so yeah, that works.
My hope is that maybe in an upcoming edition, the one thing that I thought would be so cool with this is if it had bird calls, something like that people regularly would like to be able to distinguish. Sadly, it doesn't really, it has a few birds, but it definitely wasn't set up to be something that helped you identify birds. But that's something maybe in the future that will happen, that just gives it one more cool thing it can do. So, but it's fun. You can ask about all different types of vehicles, all different types of animals, all different types of instruments.
Oh, instruments too. That's interesting.
Tuba, violin, all that sort of thing.
So it just goes to show you, and we started out the conversation by talking about some of the new things that Siri now has access to, and we ended it that way as well. And so it's one of those things that, if it didn't work last week, maybe try it again this week if you have the need.
Definitely.
something may get added.
Yeah,
So
they're always making changes.
So the book is Take Control of Siri, of course, at takecontrolbooks.com. Do you know what the pricing is on this one?
It's $14.99.
Okay, so that's I always sound like I'm pimping the books because I am. I mean, but $14.99 is not much to pay for an intense guide to Siri and what it can do. If you learn 3 new things, in my opinion, it's worth it, and I guarantee you're going to learn more. And if you're very privacy minded, Scholle has all those things laid out so that you know exactly what to do with each device to make sure that it's doing what you want it to do. So. Scholle, thank you. It's great to see you. We're going to do another conversation here shortly about another Take Control book that you've authored, a more recent one. And hey, you know you're welcome back anytime. Anytime you finish a book or you just want to tell us what you're up to.
Thanks. I appreciate it. I hope people have as much fun with Siri as I did updating this book.
That's an interesting point. Siri is just fun, especially when she works, but she's just fun to play with.
Siri is very fun to play with. There's always surprises. The jokes are funny. She gets sassy just unexpectedly all the time. So it's one of the more delightful parts of the Apple universe, I would say.
And once in a while, I get exasperated with her and say something, and she fires right back. Like some other people I know, but that's a whole other discussion. So, Scholle, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is MacVoices. Go have a little fun with Siri. Don't make it work. Get Scholle's book, and she can help you do the work, but also the fun part too. Until the next time, and as always, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you MacVoices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.